thriving, playing, living life to the fullest. Our mission for Kansans since 2003. We are Kansas Spine and Specialty Hospital, proudly supporting KPTS, Public Television for Kansas.
The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.
Hi everybody, it is time for Hatteberg's People, and tonight...
This Wichita woman faced the worst that life had to offer and emerged with an amazing spirit and a talent she never knew she had.
Also, we take a tour of Akers, Kansas. Well, there's not much left there, but it's still an important place to friends, Bet's chart, and you'll find out why.
Plus, meet a one-of-a-kind Kansan who found happiness in the simple things. It's a slice of life from 1979.
And we pay tribute to those service members who put it all on the line for their country. Some of my favorite stories of sacrifice and remembrance. That's coming up. I'm Larry Hatteberg.
I'm Susan Peters. Hatteberg's People starts right now.
These stories are like old friends. Their lives radiate from the screen like prophets of the past. They were teachers, but not in a classroom. Instead, they taught about life to those around them who cared to listen, and I was their student.
Life comes with no guarantees. Everybody faces challenges, but it doesn't get much harder than this.
Back in 2006, Jeanne Gordon and her daughter Gabrielle were riding their bikes on a Wichita street when they were hit by a pickup truck. 27-year-old Gabrielle was killed. Jeanne was critically injured and lived the rest of her life as a quadriplegic. But despite the heartbreak and injury, Jeanne found a way to make the most of every day she had left.
I am not going to let this get the best of me. And I am the same person, the same wife, the same mother, the same friend. I'm just in a wheelchair.
This was the last picture taken of the Gordon family prior to the accident. In an instant, Jeanne's life changed tragically. Gabrielle was gone, and Jeanne was paralyzed from the neck down.
About a week before the accident, Gabrielle and I were riding our bikes, and sometimes we'd pray, sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we would just be quiet. And I had a moment where I was talking to God, and I said, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do in my life? I'm at a point that I just want to do your will. What can it be? And 1 week later, the accident happened.
Jeanne now lives in the lower level of her home. Her bedroom used to be the living room. In it, she is surrounded by the statues of her faith. 6 years ago, as she regained consciousness from the accident, her thoughts weren't what you would expect.
And I had such peace, a peace that just overrode everything. And I knew that I was doing what God wanted me to do. And I knew exactly where Gabrielle was because she had been living her life beautifully for God.
From her bedroom, Jeanne can see the garden she tended before the accident.
One of the first things I do is sit here, look out into the yard and the bird feeders. I can watch the birds in the morning. It's like the Audubon Society out here. But I say my morning prayers, and I've got all sorts of things just tacked on the window here.
After the accident, Jeanne discovered she had an artistic talent, mouth stick painting. Her aides put the paintbrush attached to a stick in her mouth, and magic happens.
I would describe my art as God gracing me with a creative outlet, because I was creative and had projects going all the time, but I had never painted before. And I think he just said, you know, we're gonna let you have this talent.
She began painting during her rehabilitation at a Denver hospital. An activities director there attached a paintbrush to a dowel rod.
And I tried drawing just a little violet, and it worked. It was like, oh, yes. This is so much fun to come with them.
At Blessed Sacrament School, one of Jeanne's joys is helping to teach the children how to paint, and they are fascinated with her. And for Jeanne, these times are special.
I love it. There isn't anything better than little people, you know, and to see them expressing themselves. Looks good. Do you like it? It's what's in them that's coming out. I really like yours too. I do not know what I'd do without all the support of the community and the church and the kids and family, friends. And people are still bringing us dinners. And that's such a big part of it. I feel so blessed and so grateful.
Now, Jeanne often shared her story and her art with the school children, helping them understand that there's always a way to make the best of the worst. Now, Jeanne died in 2016 at the age of 60. An incredibly inspirational woman, and when you're around her, and when I was doing the story with her, you just couldn't believe how positive she was about life. A real inspiration to everybody.
I was just going to say, what an inspiration. I remember that story. I remember the story you did. I remember how she coped with that accident.
Oh, yeah.
A true inspiration.
Oh, she was. She was a very special lady.
Well, Kansas has a lot of struggling small towns. But here's a town in the southwest part of the state that's literally dead. Its buildings all dilapidated, its residents all ghosts.
But still, Franz Betchart is not ready to see it completely disappear.
Oh, I'd love it out here. Just part of me, just history.
There's not much left of Akers, Kansas. On the main street, which isn't, Franz Betchart knows it well. He owns the town.
It's just a place in the middle of nowhere. This is the Akers schoolhouse where all my dad's brothers and sisters went to school here. I really don't know why I like the place so much, but I just do. I just hate to see it fall apart and be destroyed. To me, it's sad. It's kind of like a death or something, you know, like the country's just drying up and dying away because those people they're gone, you know, and they won't be back. This used to be the general store. I suppose it'd be like a quick shop today because they'd have everything in there. It's just part of history, and it's part of me. And you stand here and look at that thing, and it makes you want to imagine what kind of stuff they had on the shelves to sell back then.
You also want to imagine the view to the east of Akers Main Street. A 1910 census showed 30 people lived here, but that was 100 years ago.
I can remember as a kid hauling wheat down here and dumping it in this elevator. It's part of you, and then it just disappears, you know, and it's gone forever.
Now there is just one unoccupied house and some tumbleweeds.
This particular building here was the Akers post office.
This post office, no longer first class. Its disease is time, and for that, there is no cure.
Out here on this angle road, I'd like to put up 2 signs that says Akers, Kansas, next 2 exits. Just a ghost town. It's about gone.
That man, to me, Franz, is a hero for just saving history. I mean, that is such a part of Kansas.
It is. But
I love that.
But how do you stop time?
I don't know,
That's the
Larry.
question he faces.
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. Well, France says not much has changed since I did that story back in 2013. He tried to donate the schoolhouse to a local historical society, but they had no interest in moving or preserving it. Meanwhile, he would still like to fix up the house and have somebody live in it. Maybe somebody will see this and say, that's where I want to live, Akers, Kansas.
Akers, Kansas.
Akers, America.
Okay, now to the story of a character from Conway Springs who was a true Kansas original.
Oh, really an original guy. He enjoyed life and had his own take on things. Here's what happened when I showed up at his house in 1979.
That's 70-year-old Waddy Watson standing over there by his 50-year-old pickup. Waddy and his wife Lucille are Conway Springs natives, and Waddy's 50-year-old truck is a common sight in the Conway area.
But you asked me about my old truck. It and my wife are my two most valuable possessions. She gets a little jealous of the truck once in a while.
Is that right?
Yeah, she says that I think more of it than I do her. Well,
Do you?
No. I can get along without the truck. The truck can't cook.
No, it can't cook, but Waddy's 1929 Model A Ford does turn many ahead when he goes down the street.
That thing's a movie camera, huh?
Yeah.
She runs like a sewing machine.
Fishing your hobby?
Fishing's about half of my life anymore.
Why?
Well, you won't have to ask me why when you get to be 70. Fishing's the main thing. Fishing and eating and sleeping. Just about it.
The birds love Waddy's house because he always feeds them wheat and other grains, and here's the reason why.
Well, I'm trying to make up for some of the meanness I done when I wasn't what you'd call a Christian boy. You'd think I was a rich man, but they give me this wheat.
Now, if you look closely, you'll see a fire burning in Waddy's garage. It's nothing to worry about, but it is an unusual area to have a fireplace.
Well, that was some more my fine little wife's decision. She didn't want her house smoked up. I was going to put it in her front room, and she said no go. She didn't want her wallpaper smoked up. Of course, my next door neighbor sells wallpaper. She could get some new wallpaper.
Waddy's life is his truck, his wife, and his birds. And in this day of depressing headlines, spending a morning with Waddy is like a spring breeze. It's refreshing.
You never know what's going to happen next. Never a dull moment.
From Conway Springs, this is Larry Hatteberg.
You help me, he'll help me underneath here.
Waddy is a comedian to boot. I was laughing through that whole story. He is so cute and funny.
Well, he's great, you know, and when you pull up in front of somebody's house,
Yeah.
you never know what's going to happen. And Waddy was just perfect. He was so interesting, and he just likes to have a good time.
But only you, Larry, could make that story so interesting, funny, compelling. I mean, he was an interesting character, but you made him even more so.
Well, you're very sweet and very kind, as always.
That's what I appreciate about you, Larry.
Oh, my face is turning red now.
You know, every Memorial Day, we remember those who served and those who gave their lives in service to our country.
Now, here's the story of a Kansas man who works to preserve the last trace of soldiers from the Civil War to the deadliest war in American history.
I see a really lovely day, and I'm eager to get started.
At sunrise, Mount Auburn Cemetery in Topeka is more alive than you might think.
Deer come around here quite often. It's fun to see them.
Mount Auburn is the largest of 3 cemeteries owned by the city. And as the deer create life in a lifeless place, it is also where Topeka resident Jerry Ryman begins his work. His mission is to clean the headstones of Civil War veterans in all of Topeka's cemeteries.
Well, I feel like it's sort of a moral obligation because it's just not being done.
With simple equipment and the quietness that comes with a cemetery mourning, his work begins in an area where the African American soldiers are buried.
The first thing I do is I wet the stone on all four sides and the top. As I'm doing this, I always think about each person and maybe what they might have been doing during the Civil War, what kind of hardships they went through.
This is the grave of Lloyd W. Higgins. He enlisted in the Civil War as a private on August 23, 1864. He died on May 25, 1917.
Well, I started last summer, and I've done about 1,000 total.
Each grave receives the same treatment. No harsh chemicals that would damage the stones.
Well, I think the stone is not very strong. It's sort of brittle. The letters are kind of brittle. I wanted to find out how other people clean stones, so I called Arlington Cemetery and talked to one of the groundskeepers, and he told me that they just use brush and water. That's all they do, no chemicals. This is the stuff that I clean off the stones. It's lichens, and it grows on there very thick. Most of this has probably been on there maybe for 100 years.
And when he's done, another Civil War soldier remembered.
They're all Americans. I'm just making history more visible so that more people can read these stones and enjoy their stories.
In Topeka, Kansas, I'm Larry Hatteberg.
Now, Harold Tilton of Sterling had another way of remembering those who served our country. He built his own military museum, and he gave me a tour back in 2011.
We know that the cost of freedom is high, but we are determined to preserve our freedom no matter what the cost.
Well, it was a fantastic day. The sun is out, shining, and when the sun's out, I'm ready to go.
It's a cold winter walk from Harold Tilton's home to a place you might call history's storeroom.
Old Glory proudly waved over the island's highest peak.
From every war in a building built specifically to house his collection of military artifacts, Tilton created a small, private military museum.
Because it's fun, and I enjoy it. I never imagined I would have this much. It just kind of kept growing and growing with more interest and more interest.
One of his interests is an unusual part of his collection, and that is military saddles from both this country and Europe.
I have 32 military saddles. I wish a lot of the swords and the uniforms could talk to me, even the saddles, where they rode and who rode them maybe and what battle they might have been in, or it would be very important if they could talk to us.
Uniforms from every service and from overseas are everywhere. Mannequins stand like frozen sentries overseeing his vast collection.
This is a Marine officer sword that's all engraved. You know, you've got something that in your hand that could be pretty lethal or something that's beautiful to look at even.
A tired, chilled United Nations Army found themselves battling for their lives on all fronts as the communist superiority of numbers threatened to cut them off from all supplies.
Tilton began collecting when he brought some patches back from his tour of duty during the Korean War in the early 50s.
Since I did serve, that really drove it home, made me look at it at a different perspective.
Now he teaches students to remember the past so they don't repeat it.
They should remember, as I did, what a lot of people went through, and they might have to serve and do the same thing. I'm just an ordinary guy that was put on this earth and blessed by the good Lord in a lot of different ways. I feel great. I've accomplished something that was worthwhile, and now I can rest.
What an incredible museum. We're grateful to Harold for saving all that and making it as important as it should be.
That's right, and he had it on his own property, and probably not a lot of people saw it, but he saw it, and it was important to him.
And now we've all seen it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the Korean War. It is often called the Forgotten War, but J.R. Willcut from Wichita could never forget. He was a former Marine bound by honor and tradition who began every day with a salute to his father, who is also a veteran.
I come down here every morning. First thing I do, before I say a prayer, I salute him. Well, the reason I do it every day, Larry, is because I had a wonderful dad. That's a picture of him when he was in the Army. People say, why is it you got him sitting up in that chair? I say, because that's the best seat in the house, and my dad's worthy of it.
J.R. Willcut has a voice of authority that he used well as a Marine sergeant in Korea. At 80 years old now, he's maintained a personal history of the war that is deep, detailed, and heartfelt.
The thing that brought me through this whole thing mostly was, of course, faith in God and Marine Corps training. We done what we were told to do, and we done it with discipline, and we made every blow count.
The winter never seemed to end. Fighting increased with bitter intensity. Christmas at the front was anything but a joyous season.
The cold over there, people don't realize it was 30 below zero at times. That's not a wind chill factor. That's actually cold. No place to get warm. Manchurian winds. Snow 4 foot deep.
J.R. remembers everything in vivid detail. In his possession, a knife that isn't a memory, but a reality.
This K-bar knife was issued to every Marine. I used it for a lot of things. It probably helped save my life. It was real good to me, and I've tried to be real good to it.
Korea had turned from a civil conflict into an international battleground.
This M1 rifle is the most wonderful weapon, in my opinion, was ever made. This rifle would never freeze up. It would never miss fire. It was just a wonderful weapon. You slept with it, you lived with it. This was your mistress.
Thousands of civilian refugees clogged the roads, fleeing from the invading Reds.
Then there were the Korean children, and they touched this tough Marine's heart.
There was kids all over the place, but they were real dear to me. We would give them script money, we would give them our sea rations. I wonder what happened to those kids and what kind of life they had.
J.R. was in headquarters company of the 3rd Marine Regiment of the 1st Marine Division. Now, he won't talk much about himself, but he will talk about his Marine buddies.
That's what the Marine Corps is made up of, a team. You can't do it by yourself. You have to have someone to help you. We had the faith that the man beside me was going to help me, and he had faith that I was going to help him. I think of these people that didn't make it back, and sometimes I lay awake at night, and I still miss them.
J.R. passed away in 2015 at the age of 82.
It was very moving when we were shooting for him when he comes down the stairs every day to do that salute. How many people would do that? How many?
I don't know.
He
I'm
did
just
it
saying,
every day.
There are so many good people in this world,
There are.
and that's what I like about these stories.
Thank
Good
you.
people.
They are great people. Well, we're going to end the show with a story of a Kansas World War hero. He is Bennie Jeffries of rural Belle Plaine. Now, he has many medals to show for his service in World War II and many memories that remain vivid some 70 years after the war. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks to all who served as well. Have a great evening.
I do have people walk up to me, thank me for my service. It's just an experience. Once you've been there, it don't go away. Today I've had people call me hero, and I don't feel that way. I'm real thankful that I come home without even a scratch. The 8th Air Force, based in England, as a single unit, suffered more casualties than any other single unit during World War II. Before we left the States, I flew and trained as a tail gunner on B-17 Flying Fortress. The position I flew was right back here in the very tail end. I could see where we'd been, and that was the position I flew in 31 times. My wife's name was Twyla, and she was a real pretty girl, and things just kind of clicked. And 9 months later to the day, we was married. After I flew my first mission, I knew I wished I could have done something else. We come back from one mission, was the only plane in our squadron that made it back. I know it wasn't a pleasant time for her in that period of time. Twyla wrote, "I married a kind, affectionate young man. I did not marry a soldier." 3 years later, the Air Force sent home a basket case, a bundle of nerves. He's been fighting the war ever since. I'm ready for the war to end. I want my kind, caring, affectionate husband back. It makes me sad that I had to affect her feelings up like that, but I don't know what else I could have done. I was a different person when I come back from war. There's things that happen that you just can't forget. It's there and it ain't gonna go away. If I'm a hero, there's thousands of other guys that should be heroes too. No hero.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, offering 40 years of media experience.